Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. Welcome to the fourth in our Ideas Exchange series for RTPI London. Today we're talking about what is quite an apt subject in these days of COVID-19, and that's community engagement. The need for engaging communities in all aspects of planning is obviously really important, and the crisis has probably stopped a lot of engagement activity. Or put it online. So we've got a really great lineup of speakers today. We've got a lot of people who are going to share experiences of current and then potentially future ideas around participation and engagement, and with lessons learned from this current period of lockdown. As ever, we'll be taking questions from the audience, and we'll try and do a couple of audience polls to get what the vibe of what people are thinking. So I'll introduce speakers as we go along. As I said, we've got a great lineup, and we're going to start off with Steve McAdam, who many of you will know as a seasoned pro in the field of community engagement, having set up Soundings and Fluid a number of years ago, and been involved in some of the biggest schemes in London. So Steve's going to provide us with some of his perspectives of working across different areas and disciplines.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much indeed. So we've got 5 minutes apiece. I really need to get cracking. First, I wanted to say, what a condensed period of time it's been for social impacts on architecture and architectural responses to what's happening around the world. And this week has been no exception to that. On Tuesday, we started with a colleague being on the Robert Elms show discussing whose London is it anyway, multiculturalism and diversity, in reaction to the Black Lives Matter, where we were saying that creative planning can and should include everyone to build a city for everyone. It's kind of self-evident. The next day, so an article published by Claire Richards in the AJ, a call to arms around COVID-19, but also other social issues that architects are responding to. And we're very pleased and proud to be one of the practices featured there, coming up with new approaches to respond to these social tensions and stresses. And later on today, we're going to be putting together, hopefully, the finishing touches on another webinar that we'll be running next week with women in planning. And also viscerally and through the skin, it's difficult not to be aware of COVID. There are some positives as well as negatives. Here we see a street being reclaimed by a near neighbour of ours, and this is a Thursday evening event where beers and pizzas followed the hand clapping for the National Health Service, a kind of rather lovely occasion. And then just around the corner from it, another time of day, we're looking at a reclamation of the streets and playing of games I thought I would never witness again. So all of these thoughts really sort of crystallized in my mind, and my notes for today's meeting were to think about community response to COVID and what we can learn, online governance and is it hitting the mark? That image on the right there is of a very recent Haringey Online Planning Committee. Longer term planning, is COVID going to leave traces as cholera once did, which led us to public health acts and then building regulations and then ideas of privacy. And then it is always the case, I think, when new forms of dialogue are introduced, there should be rightly questions: are there an erosion of rights taking place here, or are we seeing digital democracies about to sort of open up the world for us? We would argue that there's a balance that's required. So onto some core projects, just very quickly to trot through. This is at Brent Cross South, just from a couple of weeks ago, I think, hopefully socially distanced. The good weather allowing us to carry out engagement as normal on a very large scheme there for Argent and London Borough Barnet. But with the addition of a small QR code, people with smartphones can take a photograph and link onto an online database to get much more information. And this augmentation of the digital around about the physical is something that we think is positive. We don't see it as an either or. Gathering, collating thoughts and feeding these into the master planning processes has been what we've done for years. And now that we can do it with smartphones, sometimes ourselves, sometimes working with people like Built ID, makes that channel greater and wider. But written feedback is just as good. And in fact, we find that digital material can often be visceral, sharp, and to the point, and in volume, whereas written feedback is often more considered and lengthy and nuanced. But together, you got a great picture. This is an image of the Royal Docks, where our sister company Fluid's been working on the cultural placemaking strategy for about a year now. And they brought in Soundings to help with some of the community consultation, because it really is, as you can see, a massive area, very complex also socially. And we had to come up with a new consultation vehicle, if you like, and I mean that literally, in the sense that we repurposed and built Float, as you can see in the image here, and used that to drive around the neighbourhood and get into many necks of the wood that we otherwise couldn't have. And at the end of that process, I think we'd engaged about 2,000 people directly, those who wouldn't normally be involved. And that was supplemented with social media, as you can see here, an Instagram account, so that there's a digital wraparound that brings other interest and real-time discussions. The digital and the physical for us also support dynamic and static, so we often use illustrations of various kinds and animations to explain complex things, although a really well put together exhibition, an exhibition board can go a long way to getting understandings across. Embedded technology for us is something that we take with us onto the street and into the events. The image here is of Cambridge Road Estate, with some residents using a fly-through to understand what the experience would be like from the proposed park up to their proposed apartment. And the inset down the bottom left there is of VR, which always seems to attract some of our younger users. Again, digitally extending conversation here in Aylesbury, where we actually work with Tom. Swipe screen allows you to go through, see historical maps, what the proposals are, and tapping on the screen would allow you to leave comments and also to link up with the live chat application. Shared experience as well as shared media, something that we're looking at the moment, and walk and talks, or urban safaris as we call them, are often important to understanding of place. And we're looking at now how we can use GoPro cameras and webcams to take and share that for those who are not able to actually get down on site. And as all of us have known over the last couple of months, VC is something that's everyday part of our lives. Here we're using Zoom to extend meetings, and we can pretty much replicate what we do on the ground with applications like Mural and Miro to comport, to think about thoughts, to strain things, to look at digital imagery. And lastly, to say that we're working on our own virtual placemaking hub. A number of them have come onto the marketplace, but we think that they've all pretty much ignored the community and pretty much ignored the place that they're acting in, that with the focus being on the scheme and getting that through. So we're hoping to address the balance when that's finally done. But I'd like to just again stress that what we see is not a bifurcation here, but a potential to come together to make a much better rounded conversation. And that's it from me, Tom. Thanks.
Wonderful, Steve. That was bang on time. Thanks for that.
Okay.
We're now going to hear from a series of people who are kind of on the ground, if you like, in various different authorities across London, so all working in the public sector, and actually dealing with some of the kind of issues around face-to-face engagement on major regen and planning projects. So to start with, we've got Anisha Jogani, who leads the placemaking team at Croydon Council, who've been doing some really innovative work and have won a number of awards, I understand, for urban design and placemaking and community engagement. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Anisha, who's going to tell us about some of the great work that's happening down in the south.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'll be focusing in on one main project that we currently have under development, and we piloted that initiative, and it's an engagement platform through our local plan engagement at the end of last year. And I'll try and maybe touch on how we're trying to now evolve and adapt that in the current context, and actually evolving that to more digitized platforms. But we'll see how it goes, but I'll run through what we've done to date, and let me go into presentation mode. I'm not sure if you can see the screen yet.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Oh, sorry. There we go. So I'll focus on a recent project that we still have in development, and it's really about addressing public and community engagement through the planning process. What we find often is that actually engaging our communities in specific capital projects and built projects can often be easier, whereas with longer term planning and strategic planning that's a lot more abstract, it's a lot more challenging to do so. So in order to really address that, what we have been developing is a Croydon urban room, which is often defined as a space that every town and city should have, where people can go to understand, debate, and get involved in the past, present, and future of where they live, work, and play. This can often be what engagement looks like. Large parts of the public that we serve, with a multitude of ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and languages and other needs, often fall outside of most communities that engage with standard models of consultation. We feel that effort therefore needs to be made to disrupt these systems and overcome barriers to participation and make planning popular. One of our pieces of inspiration was an exhibition that was held in 1993 in Croydon. Some of you may have been to that or know about it. It was hugely popular and saw about 40,000 visitors, and was an exhibition showcasing future propositions for the town centre in particular by leading architects and designers at the time. Our project at the moment really focuses on democratising and demystifying urban planning and making the planning process visible and decision making open through dialogue and education. To do that, we have focused on providing a platform for currently underrepresented communities, and we see this as an important step in inspiring civic agency and ensuring we best represent the views and needs of everyone who lives and works in the borough. We established a design framework to do this that responded to the overall definition of an urban room and really built on that. And a key driver for the design was the 86 kilometre square grid of Croydon, and the urban room has been designed as a scalable 3D grid of Croydon itself. And another key driver was really to provide a space for past, present, and future exploration through a three-layered approach. The current review of our local plan offered us an opportunity to test this pilot urban room as part of the engagement programme at the end of last year, from November to the end of December. And this was really an additive system that we designed, consisting of a parent site and a mobile kit of parts that could be located in specific neighbourhoods. And that the intention is that this grows as we secure both further buy-in from parts of the council, various local communities, and also as we secure further funding. Oh, sorry, not too fast. The site for the pilot was also really important, and during the consultation, this occupied the Croydon Art Stall, which is a meanwhile research space in the Whitgift Centre in Croydon. The role of the shopfront here as a space for exchange was really important for us in helping deinstitutionalise the effort. Here you can see a variety of scenarios that the flexible toolkit can enable to really provide and enable a rich programme of public activities and events. And as the urban room builds on the principles of exploring the past, present, and future, this really highlights how the past was incorporated through a collection of archival objects from the Museum of Croydon, as well as historic maps, audio narratives, and books. Here, the present was manifested as a tabletop that functioned as a workable space for officers and members of the public, and formed an integral part of the exhibition, library, and event space. The future was visualised in a heat map of ideas and feedback that gradually grew over time, from filled in interactive thematic question cards, where people could answer either one question or a more detailed survey. And each colour represented a different issue, such as transport, climate change, housing, etc. We also hosted a variety of tours to broaden interest and to diversify our audiences and outreach, such as a View City 3D model, VR goggles, and digital games from Connected Cities Catapult that helped explain the ideas of planning on a London-wide scale through interactive and intriguing gaming interfaces. The tours were also visible from the shopfront to draw in new audiences. Domestic cues such as a welcome mat, children's table and soft furnishing and sofa that we designed was really important as to provide familiar and a non-institutional space for exchange where members of the public could really make themselves at home. We collaborated with a variety of external groups such as universities and audio artists, and this really brought in the benefit here was to really expand audiences as they brought in their own audiences to the project. And collaborations range from those with artists, individuals, universities, tech companies, and other professional and research institutes. Education and engaging with young people was also a really important part of the project to diversify audiences. And in the context of the local plan that sets out plans for a 20-year period, this included a drawing exercise that we sent out to local schools. That was called that was a call out for young people to draw what's out of their window in 2039, as well as a kids table that formed a permanent part of that toolkit. We also hosted a series of learning and development sessions that was open to the public and borough colleagues, and we worked with Historic England, Connected Spaces Catapult and other stakeholders for this. Introducing game-like exercises as part of our school outreach, as well as public and member forums, was a really good way of introducing complex ideas of long-term planning and the challenges we are currently facing to a broader audience. And role play was an important method in engaging people in this. The roving or mobile component of the urban room was equally as important, as it broadened outreach and situated a mobile element in local neighbourhoods. And we visited 6 high streets, 3 markets and 7 libraries, so the numbers are slightly outdated there, over a period of 7 weeks in an effort to really reach as many people as possible during their everyday lives. Here you can see the flexible key clamp system that we developed, which we transported in a van through the borough, and this functioned as an exhibition framework and external shelter as required. And there are various scenarios that it was located in. And now where we are with the project is really to nurture this feedback loop that we've created. This was one of the first lessons learned evaluation sessions, and that's part of a series of open feedback sessions that we've organised with partners and other key stakeholders in order to really help us develop the long-term strategy for a strategy for the project. Part of this is now really also about a digital strategy and really looking at the urban room as much as a digital space as well as a physical public space. I think I'm probably out of time. I'll very quickly show you, I'll skim past this, a website that we launched last week for the engagement period for a master plan that we're currently developing for the Purley Way area. That's an industrial artery adjacent to the town centre in Croydon, and it's set to be a transformation and growth area in the borough. It will form a chapter in the local plan as well. We had a really in-depth engagement plan as part of this, and Resolve Collective works with us to develop that, and we've had to very quickly adapt to digitise it. The early phase of this engagement was really about informing the future vision of the Purley Way, for the Purley Way, and these slides show the website that was launched, and it's really and as part of the launch we were really targeted in the outreach and in the invitation to input data and information and stories here. audiences are invited to share stories in the form of recordings, texts, photographs and videos. And in a few weeks' time, hopefully this information will help us define the future vision of the Purdy Way that's really built on past and current experiences. And I think that's me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anisha. And I'm sure we'll have some questions later on about some of the lessons that Croydon can share with other boroughs around London. So thanks for that. It's really interesting. Arman, are you there?
Hello, I'm here.
Hello, brilliant. Right, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Yes,
so we're going to head north now to Enfield. So Arman is the Regeneration and Engagement Manager at the London Borough of Enfield, and also a Public Practice Associate. So we will now hear from some of the best practice that is going on the other side of London.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Really nice to be here today with you all. So yeah, as Tom said, I'm the engagement manager within the estate renewal team in Enfield. And my primary focus is the Joyce and Snells estate, which is in Angel Edmonton, just over the border from Haringey. So for those that sort of aren't too familiar with that sort of geography, we're not too far from the Tottenham Stadium. It's about 5 minutes away. And some of you may be familiar with Meridian Water, which again is about a 5–10 minute walk just next to sort of the IKEA, and the North Circular, which is just above us there. So it's all the way the other side of London to Croydon, and sort of the southern side of Enfield, I guess. And Joyce and Snells, it's a estate which was sort of post-war, and I guess since I joined, we've been leading up to holding a ballot to redevelop it. That ballot was meant to be probably around this week, actually. It was meant to be in June, but for obvious reasons, pushed back until the autumn. And that was really where all
sorry, Martin.
Yes.
I don't think you've got your slides up. At the moment,
really?
It's a white screen. Yeah, we can just see your mouse kind of floating around.
Oh, that's strange.
Try sharing again.
Yeah, I could try and share again. Do you want to just send the link through again then?
Yeah, let me try.
It's still white?
Yeah.
Right, okay. I'm not too sure why that is. Let me just see. How about now?
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah.
And it's gone again. Okay.
I can notice it in that mode. It doesn't matter.
Just give me, yeah, okay. Just give me 2 secs. Fine. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So yeah, as I said, this is sort of the geography that we're dealing with, and as I said, we're sort of leading to the ballot and the engagement, which I sort of, when I joined about 6–7 months ago, was all the way leading up to that. And for obvious reasons, that's all had to be postponed indefinitely. And this infographic in front of you now was sort of published a few days ago, and I think it's one way of just illustrating how complex and sizable the task has been to respond to the situation of the last few months. And you know, as a council, we've taken a pretty proactive approach to that. And really, it's, as I said, it's just one example of how difficult it has been. And I guess preparing for this webinar, and also, you know, as the conversations have begun to emerge around returning to the estate in sort of the next couple of months, I've been really thinking about what the plan is once we return, what engagement will look like, and how to really, I guess, build from the experiences of the last few months in Enfield. So, I mean, prior to the lockdown, we had a digital engagement arm, which primarily consisted of online polling. That was, you know, it was successful, but we definitely weren't investing as much time and energy into it as we sort of need to be doing now. And so, definitely moving forward, once we get back, that side of things is going to be a much more central part of our strategy, and the what that will look like. I mean, we're going to be going live with some stuff next week, which revolves around a village hall, and continuing the polls. But certainly, as I look forward to returning in sort of July and August, one of the first things that I'm going to be trying to get a sense of is what the networks and relationships are on the ground on the estate. And certainly, I think I can't just speak for myself here when I say that one of the most amazing things about the lockdown has been the emergence of new networks and relationships that have really been a response to the situation. So certainly where I live, the mutual aid network has been fantastic, and certainly a lot of people who are in vulnerable positions have been able to rely on that fantastic support system. You know, for me, my first question is, what are the implications of that been on Joyce and Snells and in Enfield? And similarly, the council's response, which was a fantastic horizontal borough-wide collaboration between residents, community groups, local businesses to provide support. What are the implications of that for the estate, the community? And for me, that, you know, getting a sense of those new relationships, getting a sense of those networks is going to be paramount, and understanding that, you know, what can I do to support them once the immediate need of COVID has gone, and I guess also understanding what the impact of that is on the project. You know, as for those of us who work in engagement, who work with communities, you know, we are primarily there to facilitate and support existing networks and relationships. And, you know, the last few months, I think a lot of those are going to be emerging in interesting ways. So what is our relationship to those in our respective projects? And the other thing for me is you know, the importance of space. I mean, we all work in the built environment, so this is not a novel idea to us. But I think the last few months, for me at least, that relationship between physical space and health and well-being and sociality, how we relate to each other, has become, you know, has come to the forefront of my mind. And returning to Enfield, definitely I'm going to try and kickstart an initiative which was taking place before lockdown to sort of enhance our green spaces and make them more suitable for the community and their wants and needs. But, you know, I'm also keen to understand how that has changed in response to the lockdown, and whether there are new spaces on the estate which can be enhanced and supported to meet the needs of the community over the sort of the next period. And I think part of that is really about us as local authorities being flexible and responsive in ways that perhaps we're not always used to being. So this that tweet, which may be quite small on your screens, is definitely on mine with this view. But, you know, in Rotterdam, with you know, with the local authority allowing businesses to convert those spaces to whatever they require without permits, I think that's a really good example of the flexibility and intelligence that we need to adapt to, certainly in Enfield, sort of moving forward. And that's it for me.
Wonderful, thank you, Arman. And apologies for the issues with the slides. We will be hopefully sharing some of the slides and some answers to questions after the event. Right, we're going to stick with our public practice associates now. We've got Carmel Kareem, who is currently working as an urban designer within the GLA, and is going to talk to us about some of her experiences.
Yeah, just making sure you can hear me.
Yeah, that's great.
I had with the camera, but I'll be here in voice only. So I wanted to talk a bit about planning with young people today, and more specifically, how can young people be involved in long-term strategic planning? So this is partly out of my work during my year with public practice, where I carried out some practice-based research together with Sophie Beagles, who is an associate at the Royal Docks team, and Matt Brown, who is placed in Croydon. And just to start by briefly defining what I mean by strategic planning, and do that in the context of my work within the Growth Strategies team at the GLA. And this is a recently formed team that's dedicated to creating frameworks and spatial strategies for London's opportunity areas. And in case someone isn't familiar with that term, opportunity areas are London's major source of brownfield land, which have significant capacity for growth. And they've been around since 2004, when London was just starting to grow, but have really expanded in every London plan since. And most recently in the draft London plan, expanding out into outer London much more, following proposed transport infrastructure. And these areas are really significant in terms of home provisions and jobs provision. So they provide at least 2,500 homes. But in the case of the Royal Docks, which I'm currently working on, this figure is much higher at 30,000 homes target. So planning frameworks for these areas have to be really holistic documents. They have to take in every element from accommodating these new homes and economic growth, but also crucially supporting this growth with sustainable and social infrastructure to create inclusive, successful places. And the importance of giving young people a voice in this is really apparent. Like, these documents show 20-year visions for places that will undergo such significant change, and young people are really the ones that this will impact on the most. But unfortunately, they're also the ones that are left out of the conversation very often. So speaking about this now, I feel like it's resonating even more how much we really need to work hard as an industry to reach those communities that are traditionally excluded from decision-making processes. And that's what led Sophie, Matt and I to develop and test some resources that are designed to be easily used and adapted by local authority planners to empower young people to participate in planning. And we look to address some of the existing barriers to engaging young people, including lack of resources, lack of specialist knowledge, difficulty accessing young people, and really focusing on creating direct connection between decision makers and young people to support long-term relationships, but also facilitating a shift in perception where young people often felt they couldn't influence decisions, so there was no point in participating. We felt the workshops had to ensure an equal exchange, so giving young people skills and insight, as well as paying them where possible in exchange for understanding their values, challenges and priorities. And we tested 3 workshops that break down the planning process into 3 stages. So observation and analysis, and then planning and negotiation, and finally decision making. So the first workshop is an urban trail that's loosely inspired by Colin Ward's work in the 70s, and it asks young people to walk and map their local area, noticing and noting what they like, what they'd avoid and what they'd improve. And crucially, it's followed by facilitated discussion back inside. So we tested this with a diverse group of young people called the peer outreach workers, who are at the GLA, part of the GLA Youth and Education team. And the second workshop is the strategic planning game, and is actually adapted from the brilliant game that Anisha mentioned earlier that the Croydon team created, where Matt was a part of, for their local plan, and we just tested using it in different contexts and how it could be adapted. So we tested it in Greenwich, and the workshop really cleverly sets out a game of negotiation that breaks down different elements that go into a strategic plan and allows young people to discuss their own priorities for the local area, but also crucially it increases their awareness of the types of decisions and compromises that planners have to make in the planning process. And finally, a mock planning committee, fairly self-explanatory from the name, but the idea here is that this could be used to gather feedback on an emerging spatial strategy, policy or proposal in more detail. And we tested this in Haringey, and we hope that through role play we can facilitate an open debate on strategic planning, but really focusing through the lens of a single tangible project. And another key element here is to build up confidence in young people and knowledge to be able to participate in these open democratic processes. How many of us have seen young people coming to a planning committee, but wouldn't that be amazing to change that? And just to touch on a few reflections to end, I think testing these workshops across different contexts in London really highlighted for me the importance of investing time in ongoing collaboration that reflects the longevity of the planning process and the lifespan of these strategic projects. And I think there was a real appetite from schools and from the young people themselves if we could come back again or come back and do more sessions. And I think hopefully these workshops become a catalyst for starting a sort of relationship between planners and young people. And I think recognizing the value of young people and the importance of giving them a voice in a really genuine way, so being open and honest and presenting real life challenges that planners deal with, because they can take it, and it doesn't just build trust, but it also allows the conversation to be much more productive and on an equal footing. And as was touched on by previous speakers, but in light of COVID, we're seeing everyone moving online in every aspect of our lives, including sessions like this. And while this has some benefits, it's also important to recognise it's not accessible for everyone. And I really think we just can't dismiss the power of real life interactions, of putting yourself in the environment of young people. And I think the Urban Trail was probably the most successful in doing this and getting young people to see their unfamiliar environment in a different way. And finally, to end on equality, something we've all been reflecting on even more since the murder of George Floyd, but it's really for me bringing into sharp focus the importance of reaching forgotten voices and really proactively trying to address the power imbalance of who gets to shape our city. So yeah, some thoughts going forward there. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Carmel. And again, if anyone has any questions, please put them online and we'll try and get through them in the final part of the session. So we've just got one more speaker to go, and that's Sarah Atkinson, who's the Community Relations Manager at the Royal Docks team. There was a hint towards the Royal Docks, which is one of London's major current opportunity areas that's yet to be realised, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on down here there that Sarah will now tell us about with regards to community engagement.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Just wanted to check. Okay, the Royal Docks, then and now, situated in London Borough of Newham, which the Royal Docks delivery plan is a joint plan of the London Borough of Newham via the Mayor of Newham and the Mayor of London. So this is a huge opportunity for unlocking economic growth for London and for the UK. It's an enterprise zone and it also meets with the opportunity area. There's 4 kilometres of dock water, huge infrastructure investments, 220 hectares of publicly owned land. London Borough of Newham, one of the most diverse boroughs in the entire country, over 200 languages spoken. Also some of the pockets of highest deprivation in the country. And as we've seen with the statistics on Black, Asian, minority, ethnic impacts of COVID, this is also a place where recovery is going to be really, really tough. And there have been many deaths from COVID from these communities. And the plan for economic and social recovery is going to be a long journey. So how do these things meet up in this place where there's going to be huge investment, creating huge amounts of jobs, many homes, and commercial space? The delivery plan is the way that this will be realised in partnership with the local plans. Everything is done in partnership with the local authority and through the Mayor of London, which is kind of a very different way of working. And the context of all of this is an extremely complex, multi-layered, multi-stakeholder, multi-development context. And this is significant because there are so many different timelines, so many different people involved, so many different budgets and decision-making processes, so many development sites, some of them being managed by the GLA, some by Newham, different landowners like the University of East London, London City Airport, different neighbourhood plans. This is going to be a complex place for community engagement. So what does that mean in terms of how we're looking at it? It means starting to stop talking about consultation actually, and stop talking about engagement tactics and tools and ways of doing it better, and starting to think more about a place-based resilience strategy and how the different roles of all these different stakeholders come together to create an ecosystem that enables a place-based resilience. And that is really essential in this complicated landscape, because we're trying to aim for an ambitious regeneration where there is a community-led regeneration, where there's an inclusive economy and a community wealth building strategy, which are key to the Newham plan in general. And this will require, I think, 4 main things. This is how we're looking at community strategies. One conversation around regeneration means that all of these different stakeholders, landowners, investors, we need to be talking together about the different regeneration plans, about lining up our different timelines for engagement, and about creating one narrative that really plays back to people how their feedback is being fed into actual decisions. It also means a coordinated investment. There are many different pots of money here, and maybe they could be realised through one community garden here, one school-based initiative here, but actually what would be much more impactful is a coordinated investment, which is investing in the capacity building, the capacity development of civil society and community organisations who are leading the change. And all of this requires experimentation. And that means really thinking about how we are working together completely differently amongst all these stakeholders. And it comes back to creating a conversation which equalises power, recognises the assets of these different stakeholders, and builds a collaborative approach. And that sounds easy, and it's not. It's really, really hard. We've started learning from communities and from stakeholders through COVID-19 sort of recovery and strategy conversations that have brought together all of these different stakeholders in one conversation, trying to test this approach. And that's been based on need. It's been based on the need of different stakeholders, community organisations, businesses, the airport, the university, the developers, to understand what's happening. And we've seen new connections created, and these hyperlocal networks who are starting to deliver services and reimagine their own social value in a different way. Developers are now seeing how they could contribute, maybe not just through money, but through people time. Or we have social enterprises who have made new connections with other social enterprises and come up with a PPE makerspace, which they're piloting and testing. So this is, all this opportunity has created the needs and the priorities around what should be a long-term strategy. And that's been really interesting to be a base as a groundwork creating a long-term community strategy. So we've tried to take this forward into what is building on the 2019 consultation that Steve mentioned earlier, into the first really kind of public and visible set of changes that will be happening across the docs, the public realm framework and the engagement programme around that. The first step of that is developing design guides that you will be very familiar with, and we've thought about how to do this differently. It's been a huge challenge trying to create this one conversation when we have 25 different timelines. We have a public realm timeline of delivery, which is very tight, works that need to happen, and trying to squeeze real engagement into that is something that requires a shift of power. Talking to architects about how behavioural insights and user experience design means spending much more time understanding who you are as a designer, what your background and experience is, and does that really reflect the experiences of the communities in the area, and how can we create more of this capacity enabling process that enables communities to invest in the work they're already doing, whilst also feeding into the documents, the processes that developers, planners and that we need, and that is going to produce some tangible change in the public space, given that post-COVID, and whilst we're in this context of heightened conversations around inclusion and racial injustice. So we've looked at asking communities how they want to be involved, which has taken a lot longer than everyone wanted. So I've been that annoying person trying to stretch all the timelines. We've created facilitation packs for local communities to work with some of the groups who are most often excluded from space, so that they can input into some of the principles and the concepts in order to get to a place later on where we can look at all the things everyone wants to do around co-design and creativity and co-production. But that will never happen unless we're building in the capacity, keeping in the knowledge, and not going to external consultants and multiple processes to extract knowledge. So that's been the process so far. And we're looking forward, we're still at the beginning of the journey to developing this over a plan that rolls out over the next 10 to 15 years. So yeah, that's the main message. I'm going to skip past these slides to this approach being something that underpins our strategy in the Royal Docs.
Excellent, thank you, Sarah. That's really interesting and kind of really reinforces the need for this to be a kind of a long-term thing. You can't just do a single consultation. It's much more about a kind of a longer-term discussion. We're going to spend the next 10-15 minutes just getting some questions, and I haven't got that Arman and Carmel are still on the line, so hopefully they'll be able to pick up some of this. We've also got a couple of polls that we'll try and do. One of the themes that we've been doing through this series is actually kind of whether innovation comes out and whether new ideas come out of COVID. So I think one question that I think we could probably start off on, and I'd be interested in the panelists' view, is whether the COVID-19 crisis could actually lead to greater levels of participation, because actually we're having to innovate more in terms of how we participate. So maybe Anisha, you could kick off with that one, and we'll see what the audience think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. I think we need to look at it I think what we're trying to do is really understand what challenges that it is revealing. I think it could lead to greater levels of participation, but it will be a real it will be a challenge, and I think we're having to innovate, and what it's revealing is disparity in digital literacy and actually outreach, and how we reach audiences that may be even more marginalised through this crisis will be really important. So I'm optimistic in the sense that I think it could lead to greater participation, but it will be and I think it's one thing that has come out of the crisis is that it has made the need for really meaningful participation a lot more urgent. So I think in the long run it can, and it's highlighted the importance of the work that we do for that to be a lot more democratic, and in order for future crises to be resilient. So I think it's a new challenge that we're having to respond to, but it is important. It's made it a lot more urgent, which is a good thing, I guess.
Yeah. That's great. So I mean, I think most of the audience share a level of optimism. Actually, it could lead to greater participation. I think anecdotally, you're seeing a lot more of communities actually talking to each other, particularly in London, which is kind of renowned for people not knowing their neighbours. I heard a story the other day about a planning application that had been submitted, and it had been subject to online engagement in this kind of post-COVID era, and a lot of people hadn't heard about that in the community that they'd done it. So I guess the next question, and maybe I'll pass this on to Steve, who kind of has a view on this, as to whether actually this kind of move towards more online engagement could further marginalise disadvantaged groups. And I think there is, given the events of the last few weeks, the issue around equality is obviously kind of really a kind of a hot topic. So again, that's one for the audience, maybe Steve, and then Arman and Carmel, I'd be interested in hearing your views as well. Sorry, Steve, I muted you, by the way. Okay. Arman, are you there?
Tom, yeah, thanks.
Oh, sorry, Steve. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes. Sorry, I put you on mute.
Okay. So yeah, it's an interesting question, Tom. I hope you can hear me. I've got roof works bashing about above my head. I think inevitably we were moving into sort of a digital way of doing things anyway, and over time I think it will probably stabilize. But right now there is an uneven level of participation, and I think it's not just to do with technology. It's also to do with education, familiarity with digital worlds and means of expressing yourself. And my fear is right now, right at the moment, and I know this from having talked to many people on the ground, that they fear this next period of time, and what they're being presented with is a world that's very unfamiliar and very shaky. So in the short term, I think, yeah, we're facing real fears. Hopefully we can find other ways to nurture people through that process. And just one thing to finish on, I had a look at Haringey, where I live, conducted their first online planning committee earlier this month, which I went to check out and see. And I had a good look around Haringey's website. I went to all the places where I expected to be able to find that information about this committee, and I couldn't find anything. And as I know my way around websites and I know my way around planning, it made me fearful for those who don't, to what extent they were able to get connected with this so-called online platform. So yeah, I do have worries. I do think that there needs to be someone patrolling standards here and making sure that this isn't just a quick fix in many ways that we're seeing here.
And Carmel, it's really interesting to hear about the engagement with school groups. And I think this is certainly something throughout my career. You know, I think even when I was a graduate, we were wrestling with how you actually do meaningful engagement with young people. And I'm quite interested in your responses to how, and some, you know, it's a question that someone's asked is how effective it actually is and whether it really does make a difference. So I think there's a big risk that you engage, but then you disappoint. Is that something that chimes with the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, that risk is always there. I always think that it's better to do something than nothing. But I think what we're really careful in trying to set into the workshops that we design, that, by the way, will be available for anyone to download open source very soon. I think what we were trying to do is open up an equal exchange. So the way we design them, that is really important to both build up skills in young people and build up understanding, but also make sure there's data that can be easily collected from the workshops, so that there's things that are relevant to feed back into strategic planning documents in a real tangible way. I think that's really crucial, and the workshops were very much designed in collaboration with other officers in the places where we tested them, to make sure that the data will be picked up and actually fed into these documents. And I think this is just the start. It's really important to say that as well. I think there's a lot more that can be done, and really the emphasis is on the long-term engagement. So not just coming in for one workshop, but actually being able to come back and say, well, look, this is how what you've told us has shaped what we're proposing for the area. What do you think of it now? And to sort of come back and keep iterating that. I just wanted to touch on the point that you made about the question previous about online engagement. I think what's really important here is that we don't just revert to everything that we've done already and say, how can we do this online? I think we need to think really carefully about how to create new things that work better in these times where we're extremely limited. So one phrase I heard the other week was space for sociable distancing, and how can we find room for things that maybe isn't just taking what a consultation always looked like and putting it in a website, but actually rethinking that format. And I think that's a real chance and a real opportunity to do that, I think, now more than ever.
Great, thanks. And Arman, I mean, similar thing. I mean, in your experience working up in Enfield, do you think enough resources being put in these kind of very cash-strapped times into engagement? I mean, it's great. I think public practice associates doing a good job, such as yourself, but should there be more money spent on this to make it more meaningful?
I think that money is definitely always going to help. You know, I don't think any council is going to reject money for more engagement. Realistically, in terms of you know, in terms of the current situation at the moment in Enfield, for example, there's lots of people doing engagement, but there's not necessarily the conversations taking place to link all these things up. And I would say that one thing which I've appreciated about public practice, for example, is the ways in which those connections have been made across the different boroughs. So the different working groups that have been established, the different relationships that have been formed, which really have put engagement front and center of a lot of different programs and agendas. So I think initiatives like public practice and just more conversations which can take place between engagement specialists across the city and across the country even, will compensate for, as you said yourself, you know, a lack of financing available for this kind of support.
Related to that, there was an interesting question earlier that came up. I've just lost it. Actually, to Anisha, if you're still there, around the urban room, which actually I think is a really great idea, and you know, is something which actually makes the local plan process a lot more interesting to kind of put people on the street. But there's a question about whether it should be the council officers and experts who are manning the urban room, or whether it should be by local groups or independent of the council. I'd be interested to hear your take on that, and then maybe pass on to Sarah and Steve.
Yeah, sure. The intention for the urban roam longer term is for it to be is to really build up ownership and community ownership of it. So the way we're approaching it is really creating a public platform and a public space, and that can be occupied and owned by local communities. But at the same time, a really important aspect of it for us is to weave in an element of learning and education, and for that I think collaboration with experts and expert organisations is equally as important. The public programme the Learning and Development Programme we ran, that we usually do internally in their CPD sessions, but we opened it up to for anyone to drop into and held it in that space, was really successful, and I think until we're able to kind of break down a lot of the barriers that exist for people to be able to participate, until they understand what the complexities and challenges are and what they have to, and what we are negotiating with, it's really impossible for them to be able to meaningfully participate. So that level of empowerment is really crucial. So I think it needs to be collaborative, but by no means should it be pure only council run or run by officers and experts. I think it needs to be a two-way thing, and that learning platform is as much about learning for us as officers and experts from those local networks and local communities, and young people equally. And yeah, Carmel mentioned the workshop that we ran in schools, so we're trying to learn as much as we can throughout the planning process and through projects that we do. Yeah, for it to be truly participatory. I think that answers your question. So,
yeah, no, that's great.
I think Sarah was trying to say something. I could see Sarah's video, but I think she was on mute.
Yeah, so we're virtually out of time. So just the last question for Sarah then. Given that there's so much money, and again, a lot of this comes down to money, really, isn't it? There's a lot of private and actually public capital coming into places like the Royal Docks and across London. Do you think that, you know, engagement processes can actually make meaningful change to the way that development and regeneration is brought forward? It's probably a big one to finish on, but yeah, an interesting one, which we might not get to the bottom of today.
Yeah, absolutely, it can make a difference, and that's what people are starting to see now. You know, when I think what we've seen from these multi-stakeholder calls is that the local knowledge is something that local people hold, and sometimes they don't even know that they hold it because they don't have the opportunity to share it with each other and not facilitated to share it themselves and to share it across. But you know, developers, businesses have been extremely interested in attending these calls to hear what are these amazingly agile and innovative responses that civil society, community organizations, community businesses have been coming up with to respond to COVID-19 and really difficult social pressures, but also coming up with innovative ways of working together for moving forward and things that they can invest in the long term. People have started realizing that they have a role in neighborhoods and a social value in their neighborhoods in maybe a different way they didn't realize that they had before. And people generally do want to spend money where it's going to be useful, but we don't have many of these mechanisms that can join up the way that we do funding or the way that we enable people to spend money effectively. We don't have proper capacity development programs for local organizations, then just chucking 2 million at them is not going to help them. It's got to be a very kind of long-term, bit-by-bit process where we're connecting up what is the right resource you need at the right time, and enable people access to funds, but access to the skills they need in order to develop their organizations and develop their capacities. So building on what people already want to do, but from a very simple term like this public realm engagement, we didn't ask people to do separate sessions. We asked them what the services you need to provide. We're doing befriending calls. We're doing youth leadership sessions. Okay, so how do we build that on and build the capacity of the things you're already doing to make them better? And that's how we invest the money. So yeah, I think smarter, more coordinated, joined up investment plans and coming together with a strategy is the way to do it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we're out of time. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for their great presentations and for their thoughts. We could probably carry this on for hours, and hopefully when we're back in normal times, we can do it in a more of a face-to-face situation. Just to give a bit of a plug for some upcoming RTPI events. A lot of you should be aware that what used to be known as the planning convention is being taken online this year as the Planner Live Week, and we're going to be doing a fringe event as part of that, as part of the Idea Exchange series on inclusive economies. Actually, I think Sarah's joining us again for that one. We're then planning an event on Plantech on the 10th of July, and then a career story event where we're kind of actually going to focus on people who've come back from furlough or redundancy situations, particularly people who were involved in who were affected 10 years ago in the financial crisis, and some lessons learned for people and planners who are struggling at the moment. And then we're planning our next Idea Exchange beyond that on High Streets on the 7th of August. So please sign up for that. The recording from this hopefully will be on our website and on YouTube on Monday, so please share, and we'll try and come back with some of the questions that have been asked that we haven't answered following the event. So thanks for your time, thanks to everyone, and we hope to see you next time. Okay, cheers.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.